The last winter of Sycamore Crossing. In the forgotten folds of the map lay a town no one visited and no one left, because there was nothing to leave for. Sycamore Crossing was a name whispered more like a memory than a place. The winters here arrived early and never seemed to leave, coating the streets and sagging rooftops with a sadness that refused to melt. The only sound that pierced the silence was the unceasing hum of cicadas, an oddity in the cold, but somehow always there, like a stubborn prayer no one knew they were still saying. Into this hollowed town came Eleanor and Thomas, each trailing their own ghosts. Eleanor was in her early 40s, all bone and worry, with eyes that scanned the horizon like she was waiting for something, or someone, to come back. She rarely spoke, her past stitched too tight to unravel. Thomas, nearing 60, wore thick spectacles and a coat 2 sizes too big. His hands trembled when he thought no one was watching, and though he never said it, everything about him screamed of something once lost, something he still hoped to find. They met at the only place still breathing in Sycamore Crossing, the diner. It wasn't much. Peeling linoleum, coffee that tasted more like rust than roast. But the smell of frying bacon and the low murmur of the radio gave the place the illusion of warmth. They didn't speak at first, just nodded, eyes occasionally meeting over chipped mugs. But that's how all the strongest things begin, not in a blaze, but a spark. Time wore on. The town grew colder, not just in weather, but in will. People whispered about the dam, how it was barely holding, how the river pressed harder with each freeze. No one did anything. No one believed anything could be done. Except Eleanor and Thomas. They started with flyers, then meetings, then calls to counties that never picked up. Eventually, a dozen hands turned into 20, then 30. People who had forgotten what it meant to hope found themselves stacking sandbags under the brittle sun. Eleanor and Thomas, never quite close enough to touch, always close enough to feel, became the unlikely heart of it all. And as they worked, they talked. She told him about her daughter, how she'd left without a word one spring and never came back. He spoke of a brother who died when the ice broke one winter, and how guilt had made him leave a family he once loved. They didn't apologize for the silence between them. In Sycamore Crossing, silence was the first language. But within that stillness grew something powerful: trust. Then one night, it all gave way. The dam, weakened and weary, broke. It didn't roar. It cracked, then sighed, then collapsed with a sound like 1,000 hearts breaking at once. Icy water surged into the town, swallowing streets, homes, memories. Eleanor and Thomas were on the edge of the riverbank when it happened. She screamed his name, and he ran toward her. In the chaos, they held each other, frozen fingers interlocked, as the water tried to tear them apart. It didn't. When the sun rose, Sycamore Crossing was gone. But its people weren't. They stood, soaked and shaking, staring at what had been their lives. And in that wreckage something began to bloom. Not despair, but resolve. Tents were raised. Fires were lit. Strangers became neighbors. People who had once avoided eye contact now held each other close. The town had been broken, but something stronger was being built in its place. Eleanor turned to Thomas. His hand found hers, not by accident this time, but by choice. And in that grip was every unspoken word, every inch of healing. They never called it love. Not yet. But it was something close. Something sacred. Something earned. And as they watched the waters recede and the sun finally warmed the edges of Sycamore Crossing, they knew they hadn't come here to escape the past. They had come to build the future.